perspectives on what smart manufacturing looks like to him. Just to set a little bit of context as far as framing up why we're doing this series, we believe that in order to understand what smart manufacturing is, we need to hear from a lot of folks with a lot of different perspectives from across the manufacturing ecosystem. It's a very diverse ecosystem with a lot of different opinions, a lot of different experiences, a lot of new things coming at us, and a lot of things that are grounded in history and experience. So from our perspective, we look at it and say that if we're 6 degrees of separation from knowing every person on the planet, we should be just as close to being able to get to the knowledge and information and domain experts who know a thing or two about manufacturing and technologies and can help guide us together on this path forward from a smart manufacturing perspective. So with that in mind, and before I bring Doug on, I just want to talk about the platform that we use. We use the Zoom webinar platform. And so what you'll see as we move through the next 20 minutes is that your microphones will be muted throughout, so you'll not have the opportunity to speak directly and ask questions. You should see me in a small window called a thumbnail. And if you don't like the way the thumbnail is presented, you can click on it and it will give you options for minimizing it, hiding it altogether, or changing that. We will spend the next 20 minutes in conversations between me and Doug. And if you do have questions along the way, there should be a black bar that's available. It may hide during the presentation, so you just move your cursor around. It should present itself as a black bar. It says Q&A on it. You click on that, ask any questions. If we have the opportunity to answer the questions live, we will. If not, we'll respond by email with answers. And if you have any questions, don't get the opportunity or don't think of them during the session and want to email me directly, my email is listed there on the slide, mike.yost@cesmi.org, and go ahead and send me an email and we will get your questions answered. Also to let you know that the session is being recorded and we will post the event online and hope to continue this discussion online as well. So with that, I want to introduce today's guest. His name is Doug Lawson. Doug is a highly respected thought leader, domain expert. I've known of Doug for many, many years and had the privilege to be working with Doug much more closely over the last few years. He's founded and run 4 successful startup businesses that have had a significant impact and certainly a strong reputation in our domain. He's currently a CESMII board member on our governance board, and the platform, the company that he is leading, ThinkIQ, is an integral partner with CESMII in the technology platform that we are bringing to market. So Doug's going to talk a little bit about what he brings. The ThinkIQ platform provides material flow transparency from a supply chain perspective, and I think that'll come through in the conversations that we have here today with his background. So Doug, appreciate you being here with us. Should also note to everybody that as a road warrior, Doug is on the road currently in a hotel. So if we have any technical problems, we hope we won't have any technical problems. I guess let's just leave it at that. So welcome, Doug.
Hey, good morning, Mike, and everybody on the call. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Perfect. So let's get the conversation started, Doug. I'll throw the floor over to you, and I will just ask you what I ask everybody from your vantage point. What does smart manufacturing look like to you?
You know, Mike, a lot of people talk about smart manufacturing differently. For some people, it's about the emerging set of technologies that surround smart manufacturing. For others, it's around the change management processes that are really occurring within the manufacturing domain. And for others, it's about the changing investment landscape, where really manufacturing from an investment perspective, it is suddenly quite sexy again. From my perspective, when I was thinking about how to really answer this question, I figured it would be useful to look at the end state. What will manufacturing look like once it's smart, big picture, compared to what manufacturing looks like today? So I put together 2 quick slides on that. So if you look here, this is kind of my view into what manufacturing looks like today. And I very specifically have said, let's look at manufacturing through the lens of the supply chain. And let's look at it through the lens of the fully extended supply chain. So in this example here, I've chosen food and beverage. A lot of our customers are in the food and beverage space. But really, you hear terms like field to fork or mine to metal. I met with a toilet paper manufacturer the other day who describes their business's traceability challenge as stump to rump. So it really does depend upon your choice of words. But what's common?
Hashtag coming, Doug.
I thought I'd throw that out there just in case we take ourselves too seriously on this conversation. But what's common across all of those is the supply chain needs to change. People, the consumers, the customers, and that pattern repeats itself throughout a supply chain, want a lot more data about what happens earlier in the supply chain if they're going to trust your brand, if you're going to be able to interact with them effectively, and if you're going to be able to sell to them effectively. So if you think of manufacturing as an integral part of a supply chain, today, supply chain systems are the red box that I've got on this slide. And they just touch the top of the real world. They touch agriculture and they touch grain elevators in this example, and they touch the manufacturing plants just enough to know at a very coarse level what the inputs and the outputs of each of these deep, complicated physical things is. The deep, complicated side on the consumer side of it is, what are my preferences? What are my buying patterns? Do I trust you? What are the related products? There's a whole bunch of data and actions in that blue column that are very important. In the plant, there's an incredible number of things that happen as physical operations occur that can affect the outcome on that consumer. And in fact, if you go all the way back to the farm, there's an incredible number of things that can occur during planting and growing and harvesting and transport that can affect the plant. Today, if we look at where manufacturing's role is in the supply chain, we see that it's pretty superficial. It's very fragmented data. It's very coarse. It's completely open loop. We hear terms about demand-driven supply chains. I think we need to move towards an autonomous supply chain where events early in the process happen later. Typically, the data in the supply chain can't be trusted. And then in most cases, supply chains end up being remarkably single enterprise. So the information that people can tell you about what they make is really only the information that they collect. So if you move to the different slide, to the next one, same picture, but the boundaries have changed. Now, when we look at the supply chain, it encompasses those very, very deep columns. And now we're looking and saying, if we're really going to be smart, everything that occurs during the growing and the planting on the farm, everything that occurs while you're storing your material, everything that occurs in this case, I actually took this from the example of a cereal manufacturer, everything that occurs in the flour mill, everything that occurs in manufacturing at the cereal plants, and everything that occurs in distribution should become visible up and down that supply chain. And this is where the huge economic opportunities are. It's, most manufacturing facilities viewed in isolation are quite well optimized. When viewed as an integral part of a supply chain, there's huge opportunities for optimization. So, Mike, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really good and refreshing too to see you talk from a supply chain perspective. We talk quite a bit about the plant, right? And focus on the plant and the data available there and the challenges with getting access to the data. So maybe you could talk just a little bit about the value you see and the challenges you see from a plant perspective, in getting access to the data, making use of the data, and making them come alive in this overall supply chain.
So if you look at that picture here, it's just interesting to talk about where are the plants. The grain elevators are a plant, the flour mills are a plant, the cereal mills are a plant. And by the way, this picture is just as applicable to almost every other industry, and we should talk about that a little bit. But if you look at those challenges, today what we see in the real world is what happens in a physical food processing plant is dramatically affected by things that happen upstream in the agronomy side of the business. Today, they react to those things when the physical raw material arrives. Sampling is done, the material has certain attributes, and manufacturing tries to scramble just in time to take the raw material that they're getting and make it into the particular finished good that they're making at that point in time. In a fully optimized supply chain, long before the raw materials get to the plant, I know exactly what's coming through. I can anticipate how to configure my physical processes to deal with that. In fact, I can change the finished goods that I'm going to produce to match the raw materials that are coming in. And I can optimize the entire material flow from the very beginning of the process all the way through. And then very importantly, when anything goes wrong, I need to know that it's gone wrong. And you can only really tell that it's gone wrong when you can monitor events up and down that supply chain. So if something goes wrong in transportation, the plant needs to know. If something goes wrong during the manufacturing process, distribution needs to know. And God forbid, if it gets all the way out to your consumers need to know. And you need to be able to communicate with them with precision about exactly what's affected. And of course, when you look at the recall world today, it tells us that manufacturing can't do that. Do you remember last Thanksgiving when we couldn't buy lettuce anywhere in the United States? There's a telltale sign of the extent of the problem.
Right. Yeah. So we've talked for a number of years about, the focus on agility and responsiveness in our manufacturing operations. And this is just illustrating that, right? So we have different triggers or more when you have integrated supply chains like this, and you can get triggers from coming from different parts of the supply chain, that now still comes back to how do I respond to that in my operation? So what do I do with that? So maybe I would like to come back and talk about other industries as well at some point, but could we talk maybe about the challenges? Because from a CESMII perspective, and certainly from your organization's perspective and the help that you're providing, is really on unlocking the access to the data, to understanding what's happening in the manufacturing operations and making the data there, the information there available as part of this overall supply chain. So maybe talk a little bit about the challenges and what's been holding us up, and what challenges you've been tackling throughout your career.
So I think the biggest single challenge here, or maybe the biggest shortfalling, is that we just don't use the sensor data intelligently enough. If you look at a typical supply chain, there's an incredible amount of sensor data that already exists.
Sure.
When you walk into a typical plant floor, there may be thousands of sensors. When you look at a typical distribution facility, there are almost always thousands of sensors. When you look at trucks and trains and boats and barges, there's all sorts of sensors on them. And that data is completely transient today, partially because the sensors were put in for the purposes of control.
Right.
Now, if we rethink that, and if we start looking and saying, what can we deduce from what those sensors tell us? Those same sensors that were put in for control actually are the clues for being able to work out how the physical materials move through a process. The sensors are the clues for understanding whether things are running well or not running well. The sensors are the essential thing necessary to drive digital twins, which are the essential thing needed to create data science and machine learning. So the biggest first challenge is using the existing sensors up and down the supply chain to work together effectively. The next challenge is that you've got to put context on that stuff. So
that's
that
where it's gonna go, right?
Yeah. It's great to have a sensor. If you've got something coming in from a sensor and you know that the value is 47.4 right now, and it's now 44.7, and now it's 44.9, what do you think? What does it mean?
Right.
Yeah. Great. I know that I've got data flowing in. Now, if I tell you that that sensor is the temperature inside an oven, and right now that oven is supposed to be baking chocolate chip cookies, and the target temperature is 370, now you know a whole lot more about whether that value of 44 is good, bad, or indifferent.
Right.
In fact, you could probably tell me that the oven is almost certainly not baking cookies.
Right.
Now, if later, when I realize that my cookies that I baked have a quality issue and I pick that up 6 hours later, the ability to correlate over time is almost non-existent today.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to take process engineers and send them on this voyage of discovery to try to find that analysis. And 9 times out of 10, it isn't worth it.
Right.
This is the stuff that machines are really good at. This is what data science was built to do. This is what machine learning was built to do. The
right.
repetitive, improvisational tasks that humans are not very good at and computers are really, really good at. So go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, human nature, there's also humans that are making a lot of money, right? There's opportunity for the humans to do that as paid services or as, I guess pushing in that area versus having the machines do it. So from a motivation perspective, obviously this is right in line, what you're saying is right in line with where the Institute is going and challenges that we're taking on. But talk about, the motives for somebody as a solution provider to say we see the value in letting the machines do that kind of work.
And I think it's moving up the value chain. And, there's a lot of talk in this area, but as we move inevitably in a society towards a world where machines are going to be taking more and more automated decisions on our behalf, as humans, we have 2 choices. We can look at it as the machines are a threat to what we're doing, or we can look at it as the machines are enabling us to move up to a higher level and do something higher value add on top of that. My advice to solution providers who at the moment are relying on selling very expensive platforms for the simple job of data ingestion and selling very expensive services for the relatively mundane process of getting a process to work first time around, there's far more financial opportunity being in a position to make your customers have true continuous improvement, to have true process optimization, and truly focus on the things that are going to create ongoing financial benefit to the organizations. Quite frankly, those services are more valuable. They're more in demand, and you can sell them at a higher price point. So I think for those who are not fearful, it's actually a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, well, and we talk a good bit that my personal belief is, and the Institute's belief is that there's a mindset shift, a mind shift evolution that needs to happen here within the manufacturing ecosystem all the way around. I think that's part of it, right? Seeing the value of moving to the higher level value add and focus there and being able to work in the kind of collaborative way like you're talking about, I think is necessary for all of us. And I warned you as we came into this, Doug, that this time was going to fly by us very quickly, and it has come basically to the end of our time together. I know we wanted to talk about the applicability of this across other industries, so maybe quick your view on that real quick, and then we'll close it out.
We're quite focused as a company on food and beverage, and we are because consumers care a lot about the stuff that they're putting into their body, and the need for brand integrity is driven to a great extent by this traceability. But the same requirement is there for anything valuable. So we believe this is highly applicable in defense and aerospace. It's obviously applicable in pharmaceutical and nutraceuticals and cosmetics. And quite frankly, we're seeing it's even applicable when you get to the commodities side. So it's absolutely applicable in metals and mining. So we think the rate of adoption across different industries is going to be quite different, but the principles are identical across all of those industries in terms of what needs to be done.
Well, fantastic. So I'll give you just the one last chance to take us out here, Doug. I'll ask you the question we started with. If you could just give a takeaway for the attendees today of what smart manufacturing looks like to you, what would you tell them?
So we're going to take all of the sensor data. We're going to provide the software and capabilities to make sense of that data. And then we're going to put that in the context of the entire business. It's not only going to make each plant operate better, but it's going to fundamentally change the way manufacturing businesses work by allowing them to operate their entire supply chains more efficiently.
Perfect. Love it. Thank you, Doug. Really, really appreciate the time, the insights, the perspectives, your leadership. I would like to thank everybody for joining us here today. Encourage everybody to stay engaged with us. If you did not have the chance to ask any questions, please email me. If you have specific guests that you want to see on here, please send them to me. If you want to sign up yourself, please send me a note. And then I will remind you that we do these webcasts the second and fourth every Wednesday of the month. Our next time will be November 13th, same time. And joining me that day will be Ken Creasy, who's the Senior Director of Manufacturing Technology and Innovation and Advanced Engineering at Johnson & Johnson. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time. Thank you, Doug, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Mike.
Cheers. Bye-bye.